بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. My students, how are you? I hope all of you are okay. As you know, today, chapter number 11, part 2 will continue in Victorian age, 1850 up to 1900. As usual, I'll tell you something about the previous lecture, which is also Victorian age, but part 1. And if you remember that I told you about the developments of this age and how it's during this period England changed from a rural or agricultural country to an urban industrial one. And also I told you about the characteristic of this period, while I can see that poverty and explanations were also equal parts of this age. And the gap, I told you about the gap, we discussed the gap between the rich and the poor increased significantly, and also the drive of material and commercial success, which was also as a kind of moral decay of the society itself. And I gave you also the Alfred Tenson's. We talk about the Tenson's here, Alfred, as one of the most famous poets in English literature. Tenson's here. Many of his poems are standard of 19th century literatures and also critical of popular favorite. So many things we talk about Alfred autobiography, how he was born in England, also in Elizabethan. Tenson's here, as a family was very large. The family of Tenson's was very large, about 11 children also. Alfred's father was not wealthy, I told you. And Tenson's here is chiefly remembered as the most representative poets of the Victorian age. I told you, you have to underline and keep in mind that Tenson's is chiefly remembered as the most representative poet of the Victorian age. So I told you about the characteristics also of Tennyson's poetry, and it is important to know that there is a characteristics belongs to Tennyson's poetry here, and we discuss all of it. So therefore, this is what I want you to know about the part 1 in Victorian age, in chapter number 11. But today I'm going to tell you the part 2, what we are going to talk about. These contents here. In the first sections, as you see here, Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, one of the novelists which we will discuss together, born in 1812 until or up to 1870. The second section will be about Matthew Arnold, 1822 up to 1888. And finally, we will talk about the summary of these or of this Victorian age in general here, part 1 and 2. We will talk all these things and cover during this lecture. So let us start it here by this slide and see Charles Dickens. As you see here, Charles Dickens was born in Portsmouth on 7th of February 1812 into a middle class, also belonged to a middle class family of civil servant John Dickens, who was an open-hearted and also a kind man. Charles spent his childhood in the atmosphere of love and also friendship. Keep it in mind, although enjoy a harder time later on. So this is what we want to discuss here about Charles Dickens. As you see, Charles Dickens developed an interest in social reform. In social reform, and also began contributing to the True Sun, a radical newspaper, although his main avenue of work would consist in writing novels. Dickens continued his journalistic work until the end of his life, editing the daily news, household words, and also all the year round. His connections his connections to various magazines and also newspaper as political journals gave him an opportunity to begin publishing his own fictions and the beginning of his career. He went on to publish 15 successful novels. How many novels for him? 15 successful novels, including Oliver Twist and David Copperfield. So, what can we say? Many things if we want to talk about the Charles Dickens and his developments. First of all, you have to know that we can say Charles Dickens was an English writer, first of all, and socially critic. The second thing, socially critic. He create some of the world's best known fictional characters. We can see that he create a fictional characters to the world and also is regarded by many as a greatest novelist of the Victorian era. As the greatest novelist of the Victorian era. He works also enjoy unprecedented popularity during let me say his lifetime, and by the 20th century critics and scholars had recognized him as a literary genius. So his novels and short story are widely read today. We can say for schools, universities, and other colleges. So Dickens here, we should read many things about his story or novels. Charles Dickens, as you see here, a great Victorian poet, opted for a very distinct writing style and inspired the generations with his intellectual idea. Since he started his literary career writing papers and essays for the magazines when he started and also for a newspaper. So he successfully tried the same style. Now in this slides we are talking about the styles of Charles Dickens. The style in most of his story, using in the style he used a cliffhanger technique, and also he was able to create suspense in his pieces marked with ideal characterizations, and also we can see that satirical tune. Oliver Twist, as example, presented the mastery of his creative mind. Oliver Twist, one of his novels, we consider it as a mastery of his creative mind. So this is what can we say here in this slides? We can add it here that Charles Dickens had enjoyed unprecedented fame during his lifetime. He was categorized as a literary genius of the 20th century. Unfortunately, in 1865, while returning from Paris, he was involved in a fatal rail crash, unfortunately, and which left him with bad health for several years. Despite this tragedy, he did not give up writing and kept on producing literary pieces until 1870, when he suffered a nerve stroke and also never regained consciousness. He died here on the 9th of June in 1870, leaving the book the Ministry of Edwin Droll unfinished. So here, this is the end of Charles Dickens, but still he is alive. And Dickens' literary success, we can say, success here began with, let me say, the 1836 with serial publications of the Bigwig papers. Within a few years, we can say that he had become an international literary celebrity, famous for his humor, satires, and keen observations. Charles Dickens has a keen observations of character and also society. His novels, I can say that most of them published in monthly now or weekly installment, pioneered the serial publications of narrative fictions, which became the dominant Victorian mood for the novel publications. So finally, I can say, and don't forget that Charles Dickens wrote 15 novels, and he also wrote short stories, essays, articles, and also novellas. This is what can we say about Charles Dickens in general as work and also biography. So let us go now to another section in our lecture and talk about Matthew Arnold, which born in 1822 until 1888. So as you see in this slide or picture here, the author Matthew Arnold Matthew Arnold was a British poet and also cultural critic who worked as an inspector of schools. First, the second, and he was also one of the chief Victorian poets. One of the chief Victorian poets. The second things you have to know about him that Matthew Arnold being characterized as a sage here means a wise writer or a sage writer, a type of writer who, let me say, chastises and also instructs the readers on contemporary social issue. So this is the one about Matthew Arnold. That's the second things you have to know in this slide, that in the world of literature, Arnold had occupied for many years an authoritative positions as a critic and teacher, similar to that held of Ruskin in the world of art. Something also you have to know that in his literary work, and it is important, and I told you about literary work of any writers who want to read about any writers, you have to look about the literary work of him. Literary work, two very different moods are manifest. In one, in his poetry, he reflects the doubt of an age which witnessed the conflict between science and rival religion. One. Two, apparently he never passed through any such deceived personal struggle as recorded in Sartor Resartus. And also he has no positive convictions such as in voice in the everlasting the everlasting, yeah. So he is pissed by doubt which he never settled, and his poem generally express sorrow or regret or resignations. So in his prose he shows the cavalier spirit, aggressive, light-hearted, or let me say self-confidence. This is also, I can add here something that Matthew Arnold began his career as a poet, winning early recognitions, I can say, as a student at the rugby school. So where I can say his father, Thomas Arnold has or had earned national claim as a strict and innovative headmasters. Arnold also studied. I can say Arnold studied at Peel College in Oxford University in 1844. After completing his un, uh, undergraduate degree at Oxford, he returned to rugby as a teacher of classics. So Arnold's here greatest work was as a writer here. So he published his first book of poetry, and also in 1849 his literary career really took off in 1852 when he began to publish more poetry volume. So we can see here that many readers have come to see Arnold as most modern of Victorians. Arnold himself defines the modern, keep here in mind, in his first lecture as a professor of poetry at Oxford in 1857. What he now defined poetry, what he defined modernism, he defined it one as on the modern element in literatures. He said that this lecture marked Arnold a transition from poet to social and literary critic. He argued that the great need of modern age is an intellectual deliverance. So a preoccupation with the art of peace, the growth of a tolerant spirit, the capacity for refined pursuit, also the formations of taste, and also above all the intellectual maturity to observe facts with a critical spirit, and also to judge by the rule of reason. So this is what can we say about Matthew. We can add here that I can say that his second volume here included a verse of a drama or a drama. and also through the most attentions for the poetry which he continued to write until his death. Additionally, Arnold was well known as a cultural critic. Don't forget that we can characterize or define Arnold as a cultural critic, publishing volumes like Cultural and Energy in 1869. Today, his work as a critic is as well known as his poetry is. So this is what can I say about the Matthew Arnold. Now, here finally, of Arnold's narrative poems, two best known are Balder Dead in 1855 and also an incursion into the field of Norse mythology, which is suggestive of Gray and Surab and Rustom. Surab and Rustom here is the best novel which he introduced in 1853, which takes us into the field of legendary Persian history. Also, the classic influence of Surab and Rustom is especially noticeable in Arnold's use of materials. Fight here, which is the main subject of Surab and Rustom, are short. Grief is long. This is the message or what he wants to tell us about the aim of this story, Surab and Rustom. Fights are short, grief is long. Therefore, the poet here, as a poem, gives us a few lines to the compared between, but lingers over the son's joy at fighting his father and the father's Quintus here sorrow at the death of his son, as we say, and also the last lines, especially with their passionate grief, sits to some music, make this poem one of the best on the whole that Arnold has written. I can tell you something about the main theme of Surab and Rustum here. What is the main theme of this poem? I can say that one of the main theme or themes of Surab and Rustum is the danger that can come from chasing one's personal vainglory too strongly. So Surab here doesn't realize that Rustum is his father when he fight him. When they fight, nor does Rustum know that Surab is his son. Yet now, because both of them feel the need to defend their glory, you know that they engage in marital combat, which winds up in Surab's death. So this is the main aim of this form or story. Therefore, this is what he over or introduced now to the age. Summary of the Victorian age. In the summary now, first of all, in general, part 1 and 2, chapter number 11, the main summary of these chapters. One is the year 1830 is generally placed at the beginning of this period, but its limits are very indefinite. The second is Wordsworth has written his best work. The other romantic poets, Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, and Byron, had passed away. The third thing is, though, the Victorian age produced two great poets, Tennyson and Browning. The final thing, the age as a whole is remarkable for the variety and excellence of its prose. A study of all the great writers of the period reveals four general characteristics, and you can read the four general characteristics during your textbook in the chapter number 11. You can find these characteristics. So this is everything about the lecture or about the chapters in general. Don't forget that this is the main summary of the chapters. The year, how it over or introduced the beginning of the period. The second, Wordsworth, what he also introduced as a best work or the best work of him as a romantic poet. And also we studied Coleridge, Shelley, Keats also, how or when they had passed away. So also the Victorian age and what he produced, two great poets. We studied in this section now, or in this part, Tennyson's and the Browning, and finally the age and what he remarkable for verity and excellence of a prose. We studied the prose writer also. The prose writers of the period revealed for general characteristics, and we talk about the four general characteristics which is present in your text book. So this is everything. I hope that you understand again this part. And now this is the time to say goodbye and see you.